Chapter 13. Father Morris, when Abelard and Evelina confessed to him the following morning the strange spectre that they had witnessed, treated the whole as a mere vision of their heated imaginations, and refusing to listen to any other surmises respecting it, prepared to attend the Queen, who, finding herself sufficiently recovered to be able to attend to her duties of religion, had, from the general reputation of a superior sanctity, sent for him to confess her. Her Majesty, indeed, seemed rapidly improving, and the hopes of Edmund reviving with her health. He passed every hour he could abstract from the duties of his station at the feet of his adored Elvira, his love for whom seemed increased by the imminence of her danger which he had just escaped, of losing her forever. In this manner several days had passed, and the strange visit of the mummy and the accident of the Queen had already taken their place in the shelf with other environments passes of the day, when one morning Sir Ambrose was startled by an earnest message from the Duke of Cornwall, entreating him to come to him without delay. Sir Ambrose immediately obeyed the summons, and found the Duke walking up and down his study in a state of the greatest agitation, which Father Morris was vainly endeavoring to tranquilize. "My beloved friend!" exclaimed the Duke, springing forward and grasping the baronet's hand in the moment he saw him approach. "My dear Sir Ambrose, Claudia is no more." "Dead!" cried Sir Ambrose, involuntarily looking at Father Morris, whose aspect, however, still preserved only its usual cold, statue-like appearance. "Are you sure she is dead? I thought she was better." "So did we all," said the Duke. "But alas, we deceived ourselves, for Father Morris has just seen her expire. Oh, where is Edmund? Why is he not with you? What will become of him? It will destroy him to lose Elvira." "That I, too, have felt so proud in the expectation of his becoming my son-in-law. Oh, it will break my heart." "Oh," cried Father Murphy, who was also present. "Well, if it isn't the case, why don't you let Rosabella take the crown at once? Make no more fuss about it." "And yet," continued the Duke, "I cannot bear that Elvira should be deprived of her rights. She would so become the crown, and with her inflexible sense of justice and desire for improvement, she would do so much good that I should feel not justified in depriving the country of such a sovereign." "Thus," said Father Morris, smiling, "do we deceive ourselves. You are ambitious whilst you think you are only just. Believe me, if you consult Elvira's real happiness, you will not impose upon her the troublesome duties of the crown. She will make a better wife than a queen, for her gentle nature is less fitted to command than to obey. Rosabella has much more firmness." "I do not agree with you, Father," said Sir Ambrose. "In my opinion, Elvira is better fitted queen to be a queen than Rosabella, for her passions are more under control than reason." "As is to say," resumed the monk, sneering, "they have not yet been called into play." "What do you mean, Father?" "Nothing that could give you offence, my lord," resumed the priest. "Disguised myself with the world, I naturally thought the princess more likely to find happiness where I seek it myself, peace, a life in quiet and retirement." "Enough," said the Duke. "But where is Edmund? Let us seek him. No doubt he is with Elvira, poor things. We must spoil their bidding and cooing." Edmund was with Elvira, and he was passionately urging his suit, while she, engaged with her embroidered frame, listened with a half-abstracted mind, and Emma duteously waited behind her chair. "You do not love me?" said he, "or you could not answer with such provoking coldness." "Indeed I do, Edmund, but you are so unreasonable. I have already told you that I have an idea of the passionate, overwhelming love you appear to feel. It absolutely terrifies me, and I am sure it is not natural to my character. The silk is too dark, Emma. And so, Edmund, if you feel you cannot be happy with such love as it is in my power to bestow, we had better determine at once to separate. Good God! Exclaimed Edmund, striking his forehead violently with his clenched hand. How coldly you talk of our separation! What can I do? I try everything in my power to please you, Emma. Give me my scissors. But since you will not hear reason... Reason? Cried Edmund fiercely, seizing her arm, then letting it go again. If you talk of reason, you will drive me distracted. You quite terrify me with your violence, Edmund, said Elvira, rising, preparing to quit the room. Oh, stay, stay, my adored Elvira, exclaimed Lord Edmund, throwing himself upon his knees and clutching her hand. For heaven's sake, stay. Pardon my impetuosity. Frown upon me. Treat me with coldness, disdain, or contempt. But do not leave me. I do not know what you wish. I have repeatedly told you that I am ready to become your wife whenever our parents think fit, and that I will do everything in my power to make you happy. Do you call that coldness? I do. Freezing, insulting coldness. Oh, Elvira, I'd rather see you spurn me, hear you declare you hated me, and know what you doomed me to destruction, than hear you speak of our marriage in that calm, unvaried tone. How unreasonable you are, she said, Elvira. Hear him, Emma. Is he not a singular being? And if I didn't find it difficult to speak to him now, what must I suspect when I become his wife? Tormenting girl, exclaimed Edmund. You know your power but too well. What ridiculous creatures these lords of creation are, said Elvira, playfully holding out her hand to Edmund, though she still affected her address Emma. I don't think any of them know what they would have, and I believe the only way to manage them is to make oneself perfectly disagreeable. That you can never do, cried Edmund, rapturously kissing her hand. At this moment, a slight tap at the door announced the arrival of the Duke and his friends. So, said the Duke. We have found you, have you? But you must take your leave of such tender scenes for the future. What do you mean? Asked Edmund. The Queen is dead, said Sir Ambrose. The glowing countenance of Edmund turned a ghastly paleness, and his livid lips quivered as he leaned against the window for support. Assist him, cried the Duke. He will faint. Don't distress yourself, Edmund. The death of Claudia shall make no alteration in your prospects. I am better, said Edmund faintly, attempting to smile and waving off all assistance. It was but a moment. The suddenness of shock overcame me. I thought the Queen was better. She was so, replied the Duke, but it seems she had some internal malady her physicians were not aware of. An inward bruise, I believe, but don't make yourself unhappy about it, Edmund. I cannot bear to see you wretched. Let Rosabella take the crown, and think no more of it. Your Grace wrongs me, said Edmund, his fine countenance glowing with the exalted feelings of his soul. However I may suffer from the violence of my feelings, I can never permit them to interfere with my sense of duty. Elvira has a right to ascend to the throne, and if my exertions can endure her success, she shall be queen. Oh, thou art a brave lad, cried the Duke, and you will really try to secure the election of Elvira, when you know, by doing so, you will deprive yourself forever of her. I should do my duty, said Lord Edmund, pressing his lips firmly together, as though to suppress his feelings. Father Morris looked at him from under his overshadowing cowl with a kind of sardonic smile, which seemed to say, You speak well, but let us see how you will act. My dear Edmund, murmured Sir Ambrose, tears rolling down his cheeks. Elvira's eyes thanked her lover for his disinterestedness, and the glow of anticipated triumph which flushed her cheeks betrayed that neither her love for Edmund nor the grief for the loss of her cousin could suppress her joy at the flattering prospect opened before her. Elvira, said Lord Edmund, gazing upon her earnestly, as though he would penetrate through the innermost recesses of her bosom, what are your wishes? Do not hesitate to declare them, for alas, much hangs upon your words. Elvira blushed and cast her eyes upon the ground. However, Lord Edmund comprehended but too well the meaning of her silence, and he sighed deeply. "It is enough," said he, in a mournful tone. "Then the die is cast." He paused a few moments, whilst his friends, though they all looked at him with the deepest consternation, respected his emotions too much to venture to interrupt it. Then, rousing himself, he hastily brushed a tear from his eye and exclaimed, "How weak is human nature! I know my duty, and I will perform it. But yet, oh, Elvira!" "Compose yourself, my beloved Edmund," said his father. "Tomorrow you will be more calm." "Oh, talk not of tomorrow," cried Edmund. "Today is the season for action. Keep the death of Claudia concealed a few hours, if possible. I will be in the meantime assembling my friends. I know the army is devoted to me. The Council of State will be chosen to direct the kingdom during the interim. I must be one of its members. Some weeks must elapse before the election can take place, I think." "3 months is the time fixed," said the Duke. "But you know the votes of the people are all to be collected, and that, with such a population as ours, will be no trifle. To be sure, it will be deputies that will do the business, and then it will take some time to elect them." "When the founder of the present dynasty ordered her successor should be chosen by the votes of the whole people," said Sir Ambrose, "she wisely recollected the difficulty that must arise from collecting your votes impartially, and directed they should elect deputies. But when she ordered that every 10,000 men throughout the kingdom should choose a deputy of their own rank and station to come to London to represent them, she did not calculate upon the immensity of our present population, nor think the evils of presence as such a disorderly body of men will bring to the capital." "Yet many attempts to reduce their number would inevitably overturn the government," observed Father Morris. "For, as it is the only act of freedom the people have long been permitted to enjoy, they will proportionally be tenacious at it." "And the majority of these deputies are decided by election," said Edmund, musing. "Then our business must be to secure the majority. Think you that any good can be done by endeavoring to procure the return of those who are disposed to be favorable to us?" "Very little," returned Father Morris, to whom the observations were addressed. "For the lower classes, from their conceit and pedantry, are extremely difficult to manage. Their deputies, however, notwithstanding the ordinance of the Queen, will probably be more polished and less learned, as the lower classes will be ill to spare the time necessary to become deputies, whilst the country gentlemen will be delighted to obtain something to do." "We must be prompt," said the Duke. "At all events, I don't like delay." "True," replied Edmund, starting from the reverie into which he had fallen. "I must get myself nominated a member of the council, and we must arrange our other travel plans afterwards." The party had now separated, and Elvira, left alone with her companion, indulged in dreams of her future grandeur. "I'm sorry for the death of Claudia," she said, "but I never loved her. She was so cold and uninteresting, such a mere matter-of-fact being. She had no soul, Emma. How can one love a being so totally passionless and insipid, wonder?" Continued she after a short pause. "What Henry Seymour will think of this?" Emma smiled. "Poor Lord Edmund," she said. "I know what you would say," returned Elvira. "I am sorry for him, and I admire his conduct extremely. There is really something very noble about him." Emma smiled again, for she saw, in spite of this admiration, that in a week poor Lord Edmund would be forgotten. In the meantime, poor Rosabella's mind was a prey to the most violent passions. A note from Father Morris had informed her of the death of her cousin, and of the designs brooding against her interests. "I will be avenged," said she. "I will show them mine is not a soul to dwell upon impotent grief. I will assemble my friends. My father's party was strong in the state. It could not be quite extinct. Let me see. Whom shall I apply?" "Oh, Lords Noodle and Doodle, both of ancient families, were both devoted to your father, and were under great obligations to him when they were young," observed Marianne. "But they are such fools!" said Rosabella. They are well connected, returned her confidant, and power does not always attend upon talent. True, and as they are so weak, I may guide them as I will. Do not reply upon that. Folly is generally obstinate, and though there may be hopes of convincing a man of sense, fools will always have their own way. How then are they to be dealt with? By letting them fancy they direct, when in fact they are directed to apply to Lords Noodle and Doodle, as though for advice more than assistance. Consult them how you ought to act, and suggest advantages that will arise from your possessing the throne so artfully, that they may fancy what you say dictates of their own mind. And then, if they advise any course, they will in some measure pledge themselves to support you if you pursue it. I do not doubt obtaining your sanction, and that of Lord Gustavus de Montfort, but I wish I could also obtain the countenance of Dr. Hartman, for he has many friends, and some talents, said Rosabella, and I own I do not feel satisfied to trust myself entirely in the hands of any of the others. Talk of liberty and public spirit, replied Marianne. Promise the redress of grievances and a radical reform of all evils, and you may secure Dr. Hartman. Yet he is not a fool, nay, he is even shrewd, penetrating and preserving. But his lunatics are generally mad only upon one subject, so even men of sense are generally some prevailing folly, and his is that of being thought of importance of state. Indeed, in my opinion, there are very few human beings that may not make subservience to our views, and if we have but penetration enough to discover their weak sides, and art enough to avail ourselves of the discovery, the world is very much obliged to you for your high opinion you have of it, returned Rosabella. However, I like your advice and will pursue it. But do you think Father Morris will approve? Oh, I will answer for him, interrupted Marianne. I will then write to each of the three lords, continued Rosabella, and appoint a time and place for an interview with each. I must attend to the doctor afterwards. Beware, said Marianne. You have a difficult game to play. The old proverb says it is well to have two strings of one's bow, but four, I fear, will be too much for you to manage. Fear me not, cried the mistress. Impetuous as I generally am, I can be cautious when I see the occasion. In pursuance of her resolution, Rosabella wrote to the nobleman whose assistance she wished to secure, and receiving favorable answers, the hour of 12 that night was fixed upon for a secret meeting between Lord Gustavus and herself upon the subject. The utmost secrecy was requisite, as Rosabella knew the fiery temper of her uncle, and felt confident that if he discovered her plans before they were ripe for execution, his vengeance would know no bounds. She wished, therefore, to ascertain her strength privately, and as she was aware a fruitless struggle would only involve her ruin, she resolved not to betray her intentions till there appeared at least a fair prospect of success. For this reason, when the Duke informed her of the death of the Queen, she affected only the surprise she might naturally be supposed to feel at the suddenness of the events, and appear absorbed in grief for the loss of her cousin, without seeming even to think of the consequences likely to ensue to herself. In short, she acted her part so well that the Duke was completely deceived, and when he returned to Sir Ambrose after his conference with her, he exclaimed, "We had no occasion to alarm ourselves, or give ourselves so much trouble. I don't believe Rosabella even thinks about the throne, and I'm sure she doesn't care a straw whether she has it or not. I'm even confident from what I've seen tonight that I have only to express my wishes in favor of Elvira to have her resign all pretensions immediately." Sir Ambrose smiled and shook his head incredulously, and the Duke was provoked, for, like all weak, obstinate men, he was extremely tenacious of the infallibility of his judgment. "Why do you shake your head?" he said. "Do you disbelieve my assertion?" "I do not disbelieve your assertion. I only doubt your penetration." "And why do you doubt that?" Because I know Rosabella. Then you think her indifference affected? I think it too great to be real. Moderation is not by any means a characteristic of Rosabella. She is ever in extremes, and when she appears otherwise, depend upon it that she is only acting a part, and she has some end in view that she hopes to gain by it. Well, let her be as sly as she will. She cannot deceive me. I'll watch her. I'll defy her to think, walk, look, or speak, without the mere knowing of it. And if I find she nourishes even the thought of a revival in Elvira, she shall quit my house immediately. I will encourage no vipers. Sir Ambrose smiled inwardly at the mistaken confidence of his friend in his own judgment. Thinking it useless, however, to irritate him by farther opposition, he endeavored to turn the conversation upon another subject. "It is strange," he said, "how frequently I have been thinking of that mummy. If there is no deception in the business, it is a perfect miracle." "And what deception can that be?" returned the Duke peevishly. "You think yourself so very wise that you know so much better than other people, only because you are always suspecting something wrong. Now, for my part, I think, as poor Dr. Entwerfen used to say, incredulity is often as much the offspring of folly as credulity." "I wonder what has become of the doctor and Edric. For, ill as Edric behaved, he is still my son, and I own I should like to know where he is." "Oh, I don't think you have the least occasion in the world to trouble yourself about him. Depend upon it, he and his mad friend, Dr. Entwerfen, are rambling about Egypt, and are happier now than they ever were before their lives." "If you are right," said Sir Ambrose, "and they are now in Egypt, as they have lost their balloon, they may be even in want of necessities." "And it is very right they should be so," replied the Duke. "What business had they to go away?" The hours of this eventful day rolled on heavily with Rosabella. The important consequences of the struggle she was about to engage in forcibly impressed her mind. Ruin must inevitably ensue if she failed, and even if she succeeded, her path seemed strewed with thorns. The natural anxiety and the intrigue she was about to be involved in also hung about her. Though haughty and vindictive, Rosabella was not naturally deceitful. Indeed, the very violence and impetuosity of her passions rendered it difficult for her to appear otherwise than she really was. The secret intercourse, however, which, through the intervention of Marianne, she had long maintained with Father Morris, had somewhat practiced her in concealment, but it was still repugnant to her nature. She was now anxiously expecting a visit from the Reverend Father, and as he was generally remarkably punctual in his appointments, his non-appearance filled her with a sensation of dread. There was a presentiment of evil that crept over her, that she tried in vain to overcome. "It is long past the hour the father mentioned," said Marianne, after a long pause, during which she had been listening with the utmost attention to every sound. "I cannot imagine the cause of his absence. Surely our plans have not been discovered." And as she spoke, her blanched cheeks and livid lips betrayed a deep interest she took in his fate. "How gloomy that heavy bell clangs in my ear," said Rosabella. "It seems to ring a death knell of my hopes. A gloomy foreboding hangs upon my mind, and undefinable horrors rise in dim perspective before me." "Hark!" cried Marianne. Her sense of hearing was sharpened by anxiety. "He comes! Yes, yes, he comes!" added she. After a short pause, and in a few seconds, Rosabella heard the father's well-known step. "You are very late," she said, when he entered the room. "Good God, what is the matter?" asked Marianne, as the haggard, agitated features of the priest met her eye. "You look like one who has held communion with infernal spirits." "You say right, Marianne," replied the father, in a hollow, deep tone. "I have indeed conversed with spirits, for never could the fearful eyes that so long glared upon me belong to a mortal." "What do you mean?" asked Rosabella. "I have seen the mummy again, the fearful spectre of the tomb. I have even conversed with him, and he lives and breathes, nay, even reasons, thinks, and speaks like a human being. but the carrier cloths of the grave are still wrapped around him. His fearful eyes glare with unearthly luster, and his deep sepulchral voice thrills every nerve. What? The horrid creature whom we saw descend from above at the very moment of Claudius' accident? Heaven grant no horrible consequences may ensue from so awful an invasion of the general laws of nature, said Rosabella. I am certain it's no deception, asked Marianne. Deception, returned the priest. Even I trembled, Marianne, when I gazed upon the countenance of that terrible thing, and read there the traces of fierce and ungoverned passions, wild and destructive in their course as a raging whirlwind. Even I dreaded the influence he might exert upon our destinies, and shuddered at the thought of such a creature's being released from the fetters of the tomb, and sent back with a destroying spirit upon the earth. The eternal gloom that hangs upon his brow, even to bespeak a fallen angel, for such is the deadly hate that must have animated the rebellion when expelled from heaven. His look is terrific, and my blood froze in my veins at his horrid laugh, which seemed to ring in my ears like the mockery of fiends when they have involved a human being inextricably in their toils. It may be a fiend, murmured Marianne in a low whisper. At this moment, the clock struck 12. Rosabella started at the sound. Lord Gustavus will expect me, she cried. Go then, replied the priest, with Marianne. I will follow presently. With trembling limbs, beating heart, and all the trepidation which the consciousness of guilt cannot fail to give the finest man, Rosabella and Marianne proceeded to the terrace, where they found Lord Gustavus waiting to receive them. You may think it strange, my lord, said the agitated princess as she advanced, leaving her confidence at the gate which led from the garden, that I should desire this meeting. By no means, said Lord Gustavus condescendingly. Indeed, I have already some conversation with the emissary of yours, and that has led me into your views, and I find him your ideas upon several important subjects are so clear, so just, so sensible, and so accordant with my own, that I feel disposed to become your partisan, even before you utter a syllable. And who is this emissary? Asked Rosabella, unable to account for her reception of so unexpectedly gracious, and alarmed that she feared a premature exposure of her plans. Father Morris, replied Sir Gustavus, alarmed in his turn lest he should have unguarded committed himself. He told me he was an agent of yours, and even introduced me to... Your lordship need not hesitate, returned Rosabella. I was not aware that Father Morris had seen you, or I should have not expressed surprise. I have been induced, then, said Lord Gustavus, to bring with me two friends of mine, Lord Mayworth and Dr. Hardman. They are fully convinced of the justice of your ideas respecting retrenchment and reform, and they think your plans of curtailing the expenditure by throwing all the power of the state into the hands of a few trustworthy individuals, upon whom you may thoroughly rely, such as them or myself, for instance, most excellent. Poor Rosabella was here completely puzzled, as she had not the slightest idea what plan Lord Gustavus could possibly be alluding to, nor indeed was it probable she should, it being entirely the offspring of the brain of Father Morris, invented by him solely for the purpose of winning the noble lords, to whom he had confided it over her party. Rosabella was naturally quick, and possessing the abundance that was very unexplainable, the well-known faculty designated tact, as she instantly divided the motive that had induced Father Morris to attribute this scheme to her, and determined to avoid, if possible, betraying her ignorance. Lord Maysworth and Dr. Hardman, who had remained a little distance, and whom the agitation of Rosabella had prevented her before seeing, now advanced, and having been presented to the princess, the former assured her of his devotion to her cause. I admire your ideas exceedingly, said he, and particularly your intention of removing Lord Edmund from the command of the army, and placing an older, more experienced person at its stead. Lord Edmund, cried Rosabella, thrown off her guard by the sudden mention of the name. "Father Morris told me so," resumed Sir Mayworth in surprise.
"And he told you truly," interrupted Rosabella. "Father Morris is worthy of all the confidence I can repose to him. In fact, he knows my inmost thoughts, but I was not aware that he had seen you."
A conversation now ensued, in the course of which Lord Maysworth detailed with admirable minuteness a variety of subjects calling for reform. Rosabella did not understand half he said, but his calculations bewildered her, and her mind, accustomed to soar with the eagle flight of genius, and take the oceans with a glance, could scarcely condescend to listen to the petty articles of economy and expenditure, to which it seemed principally his object to draw her attention. She assented, however, to all he said, and having let him speak as long as he liked, without showing symptoms of weariness, and having luckily said yes and no in the right places, he departed quite enchanted, and completely gained over to her party, declaring her to be, without exception, one of the most sensible young women he had ever conversed with in his life. To this Lord Gustavus and Dr. Hardman assented, as she had appeared also to acquiesce in all they had said. The noble lords and learned doctor departed, perfectly satisfied. Scarcely were they gone when Father Morse appeared.
"My dear father,"
said Rosabella, enraptured at the result of the interview,
"congratulate me. Lord Maysworth, Dr. Hardman, and Lord Gustavus are our own."
"I rejoice sincerely, my child," returned the priest, "for heaven knows I feel a great deal of interest in your welfare as my own. But what did they say? Let's hear if your hopes are well founded."
At first their expectations were rather of a negative nature, for they told me rather that the party existed against my rival than for myself. They say the Duke has many enemies, and from his obstinate and conceited deposition, they said also that my father had many friends.
"And do they exist no longer, then, that you lay such emphasis on the word had?" asked Father Morris bitterly.
"They exist, but it seems my father had been so unfortunate as to lose their friendship," returned Rosabella. "Lord Gustavus even alluded to some crime which he said he had committed."
"Crime? Did he dare to call it crime?"
"He did indeed, and it is not possible to describe the torture that rent my bosom as he spoke. I always knew my father had been unfortunate, but I never before even suspected him of having been guilty."
"Nor was he guilty, girl. None but fools and idiots dare breathe such an accusation against his name."
10,000 blessings on you for relieving my mind from the agony of believing him unworthy of my love. I am perfectly satisfied by your assurance, and, methinks, would fain know his history."
"Rosabella, you never knew your father. You were but 3 years old when circumstances occurred that urged him to commit a deed of desperation. Seek not to inquire further, and endeavor, since misfortune has thrown a shade over your father's name, to redeem it by the luster of your own."
"As an obscure individual, whatever might be my will, power would be wanting."
"But it shall not be wanting. You shall be queen, I swear it, through all the powers of heaven and earth should unite to oppose my designs, and through even blood should be necessary to seal the compact." What was going on when a fiendish laugh rang in his ears, and looking up, he beheld the gigantic form of Cheops standing over him. The bright moonbeam showed, with horrible distinctness, the strange attire, savage features, and unearthly gaze of the mummy, and his horrid laugh echoed from the wall behind them and pealed across the water. Rosabella had not seen before, except when she knelt before the dying queen, and shrieked with horror. She fled for refuge from her uncle's garden, while Cheops thus tauntingly addressed the priest. "You are conspiring mischief, though the language your lips employed was unknown to me. That of your looks was clear. Men do not cast their eyes upon the earth and murmur forth their accents as though they trembled at the sound of their own voices, when their purposes are such to bear avowal. Make me your confidant. By my aid, the serpent deity, my guardian enough, I shall assist you, but force me to become your enemy, And Typhon himself never pursued Isis and the Infidors with more unrelenting vengeance than I will follow you and destroy your plans. Dreading alike to trust or enrage this mysterious being, the cursing of the evil chance that had led him to the spot, Father Morris, like all the English of those days, was a universal linguist, found himself obliged partially to obey the injunction and to inform the mummy of his design. Cheops burst into one of his terrific laughs of derision. "And so," he said, "you would make yonder feeble girl who fled screaming at my approach a queen, a fit monarch for a warlike people. Can a woman's arm resist an invasion of the Pali, or a woman's hands direct the reins of Mizoram's government? Alas, alas, where am I wandering? I forgot the change wrought in my destiny, and that your people seem powerless as a sovereign you would give them. Be satisfied, I will not betray thee. Indeed, so do I hate thy countrymen, that I shall rejoice to see thee triumph in deceiving them. Beware, however, that thou attemptest to deceive me, lest my vengeance, quick, sure, and unforeseen as the secret agency of the Epatray, should fall upon and crush thee at the very moment of thy fruition of thy wishes." Fearing, whilst he hated the mysterious being thus strangely thrust into his innermost secrets, Father Morris promised obedience, and the mummy retreated within the walls of Mrs. Montague's garden, ere he left the priest. However, he held out his hand to him. "Give me your hand," he said, "and let us seal our combat." Father Morris shuddered and obeyed, for the words of the mummy recalled those he had just employed. And then this fearful apparition broke in upon him, and brought with him the train of thoughts he would now willingly have shaken off. He did not dare, however, to refuse, and reluctantly held out his hand. The mummy seized it with an iron grasp. An icy chill seemed to creep from his hand to Father Morris's heart as he burst into one of his demon-like laughs, left him. Father Morris, unable to shake off the horror that oppressed him, for he felt as though he had entered into a pact with a fiend, stood gazing at the supernatural appearance of Cheops as he stalked across the terrace. His gaunt figure, rendered more awful by the grave clothes about it, was magnified in the moonbeams, which seemed to increase rather to mitigate the unearthly ugliness of the apparition it was shone upon. The priest was fixed in a terrible trance. In imagination, he still felt the cold and iron grasp of the mummy, whose eyes seemed as though they were looking into his very soul, and whose solemn accents were even now scaring his faculties. At length, however, Father Morris recovered something of self-possession, and fled from the spot, he scarcely knew in what direction, under the fear, in every turning, of again encountering the dreaded mummy.